Safety/OSHA inspectors of Reddit. What is the most maddening/dumbest violation you have seen in a workplace? I used to work as a safety consultant for an insurance broker. One of our insureds had an employee who was tasked to apply a "Do Not Enter, Compactor Starts Automatically" sign on a cardboard box compactor. The idiot set the can of spray adhesive on the lip of the compactor, knocked it in, and then jumped in the compactor to get it. Of course, it started automatically because it's a machine that can't tell idiot from box. He's lucky someone else was walking by and saved his life. Edit. He went into the compactor after sticking the sign to the front of it. I was on the Workplace Health and Safety Committee. The committee head at the time decided to change a light bulb. Do you think that she used a stepladder on the sloped surface? Nope. Office chair with wheels, and nobody to hold it still. So many stupid decisions in that last sentence. Of course, she fell, broke her arm, and received workplace compensation. The kicker? The light bulb wasn't blown. She was just using the wrong light switch. Port State Inspector. For me and most of my colleagues, it's things relating to fire safety, particularly fire doors. The amount of times I've found auto-closing doors tied, wedged, weighted, or just fixed in the open position is maddening. Fire is the worst thing that can happen on a ship, and these doors have to be able to be closed at any time. But people are too effing lazy to open a god-darned door, so they tie them open. And then guess what? Time and time again, there's a fire, and when we do the investigation, assuming there is anything left to investigate, we find a fire door fixed open that's allowed the fire to spread. People in my industry literally die every year because some effing AB or assistant engineer is too effing lazy to open a door. Wasn't our plant, but another plant from our company. We have these huge steel drums that we fill with hundreds of pounds of ingredients that go into a hydraulic lift that lifts and tilts the drum and pours the contents into a kettle. The drum shifts forward a little bit on the lift while all the way up and falls back into place on its way down. The operator was resting his hand on the bottom of the lift while lowering it back down, and the drum fell back down on his finger and pretty much turned it to mush. That's not the worst part. Afterwards, the safety lead was doing a review of the incident, and another operator showed the safety lead exactly what happened and smashed his finger in the same manner. I taught skydivers to be tandem instructors. One drop zone bought a new type of tandem rig and faked their training. Management had them lie about it to me and another examiner. Chief instructor's excuse? They're all the same anyway. He had a malfunction caused by his not knowing how the rig worked, and his poor-paying first-time passenger had no idea the danger this arrogant prick put him through. The worst thing was the training was free. Seriously, what the F? I worked in a lab doing cytomegalovirus research. One day, we had workers in, replacing the lights, and one said, "Wow, I always thought these shower things were real," pointing at one of the emergency showers in the lab. These are for heavy-duty chemical spills, where you run under the shower and pull a handle to decontaminate. Turns out, ours were just the shower heads in the ceiling and not connected to any water. We used extremely dangerous chemicals every day. We got the showers hooked up pretty quickly after that. I work as a fire safety and H&S officer. At one of my sites, this particular one being a small to medium-sized shop, I was made aware of a hidden room. There's a narrow corridor to the entrance that they blocked off whenever they knew I was coming. No fire door, so any fire spreads straight into the main shopping area. The room contains a plethora of high-volt panels and is absolutely rammed with wood, cardboard boxes, and what felt like every combustible material possible. Roughly 30 years worth of crap. Essentially, the mother of all fire hazards, with enough immediate fuel and oxygen to burn down the building and the neighboring stores. The maddening part of it all was essentially all the staff at the shop were aware of it, but did nothing to fix the issue and even actively worked to hide it. If you see a fire hazard, please fix it or report it. Also, the sole fire escape was jammed due to the door warping. It would not open at all. Having not been checked in, I imagine the roughly 2 months since I was last on site. I'm not a safety inspector, but this came to mind. I'm an electrician in Las Vegas. One job site I was on was the remodel of the hotel tower at Caesar's Palace. We started at the bottom floor and worked our way up the tower 1 floor a week for a year. It was horrible air conditions, major demolition, massive dust, because the hotel windows in Vegas don't open in order to keep people from jumping out. They rely on exhaust fans to circulate the air, but don't run the fans for subhuman construction workers like myself. Then, after almost a year, coughing and gagging, when we were on the very last floor, a team of men showed up in hazmat suits and shut the job down. Apparently, all of the sparkly dust we were breathing in every day was almost entirely asbestos. FML. I've worked for a couple of engineering contractors in the past. My first firm was by far the worst for lack of work ethic and sheer incompetence. R/OSHA would have a field day with them. One time, our reciprocating saw broke. The foot that held the blade in place was busted, so rather than follow protocol and get another saw, my coworker fastened the blade in place with a plastic wire tie and proceeded to use it. The same firm worked as contractors for the company my dad worked for, so he has the best/worst stories about them. On one job site, they found that sections of a pipeline had been sealed with an asbestos gasket. The boss of my firm, I'll call him Jim, was present on site and had to call in a specialist to remove the asbestos. Jim would never wear safety gear like the other guys, claiming to be exempt, and so when the specialist turned up in full breathing gear and overalls and tried to do his job, Jim just stood leaning on the pipe in his normal clothes talking to him. My dad and the others are stood well away from the asbestos at this point, and he shouts out, "Jim, what? Are you immune? Immune to what? Effing asbestos." I've breathed loads of it in power stations. It's all political. My dad says that Jim has defied all facets of medical science by staying alive this long. Equipment operator used brake cleaner to remove grease from his hands and arms, then proceeded to light up a cigarette on his way out of the work area. Fairly significant second-degree burns on both hands and forearms. I once worked for a family-owned company that built towboats and barges. When I asked my friend/boss who got me the job about mesothelioma and why it was so prevalent in the industry, he told me, "I've been instructed by our lawyer not to answer that question, not to mention all of the other things I was told to overlook when I became part of management." My dad went to his work OHS committee and asked them to mow the patch between the parking lot and the building because the grass had gotten so long that snakes were living in it. The community decided it was too risky to have someone mow because there were snakes in the grass and the person mowing might get injured. I have many years doing safety inspections. I have seen some fun things in my time. I have seen industrial fans' cord spliced onto an extension cord with the bare wires exposed and charred, and the employer saying it's fine because it still worked. An owner of a nursing home reached into a used and full sharps container to prove that needles were not being recapped. A guy outside of a window on a third story of a house on the edge of a board removing a window pane without any fall protection, while his two buddies are on the inside on the other side of the board, holding him up. There is a level of trust that I do not have with most folks. Walking up to the house and the owners had made a makeshift driveway out of asbestos siding that they had removed from the building the previous day, and seeing kids playing in the area. A compressed gas cylinder filling station would receive old cylinders, and they would have to empty them prior to repairing or destroying them. The guy doing this would take them out back, and while holding his breath, would secure them and open the valves to empty them and then go inside. This worked okay for a while until it didn't, and he got dosed with a massive exposure to arsine gas. The company usually didn't deal with this gas, but had received from one of their customers for disposal, which almost caused complete renal failure. These are just a few that I can recall that kind of stuck with me. There are lots and lots of run-of-the-mill safety issues that I see all the time, but the majority of the time it's ignorance of the law, and not malice from most employers. I manage safety for a medium-sized UK company. Best one to date was where I received a phone call informing me a supervisor on the factory floor had damaged their hand in a razor-sharp guillotine. This is an automatic guillotine which cuts material to specified lengths at approximately 5-second intervals. I turned up to find the supervisor's hand wrapped in cloth, which now had turned red due to the large amounts of blood. Turns out that some material became stuck in the guillotine, preventing the blade from cutting properly. The supervisor, without isolating the machine, tried to beat the 5-second count and free the obstruction of the guillotine, cut right through the palm of his hand. Turns out the blade just missed one of his main arteries in his hand, so he was extremely lucky. This is coming from my stepbrother. He managed a warehouse that had industrial-sized rolls of aluminum and other metals. These rolls weighed multiple tons each. They would use an automated crane. They would program each space available, and the crane would place the rolls where they were delegated. My brother tells me about an employee that knew how to work the system. This guy was lazy as H and knew how to get away with it. It turns out he programmed a slot on the top of his stack to be a dead zone. No rolls would go to that one spot. He set up a makeshift bed and would crawl up and take naps. He kept this secret, obviously. If someone had seen this spot was unused and reprogrammed it, the automated crane would have placed a 4-ton roll on top of him while he slept. Some people are wild. Not the OSHA guy, but it happened in the plant I was working in. Idiot is told by junior manager to clean the floor after a chemical spill. I don't recall what it was for certain, but we used a lot of industrial adhesives, so maybe that. Idiot ignores all his safety training and the entire closet full of cleaning gear and decides to clean the spill with acetone and a steel wire brush. It wasn't so much of an explosion as it was a deep whomph sound that sucked most of the air out of the room. He was horribly burned. His clothes melted into his skin. Third-degree burns covered his body. Incredibly, he was still alive when the fire and paramedics got there. He opened his eyes, asked for a cigarette, and died right there on the floor. What did we do? Hosed down the floor, and the line was back up by that afternoon. Quit that job as soon as I was able. My uncle is a safety inspector and is always going off about dumb A's in the workplace. Same uncle broke his arm in 4 places trying to clean the gutters of his workplace with a too short ladder on top of an oversized toolbox in wet weather. My brother-in-law teaches a lawnmower safety class, but that didn't stop him from trying to unjam the mower blades with his hand without turning the machine off. He just about lost his middle finger. Sometimes people just don't follow their own rules.